Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series. So, we are continuing our discussion today on magical realism. Magical realism combines realism and the fantastic in such a way that the magical elements grow organically out of the reality that is being portrayed. So, according to John Updike, magical realism is now widely available elixir, an important component of postmodernism as well. Homi Bhabha refers to magical realism as, I quote Bhabha, the literary language of the emergent post-colonial world, unquote. Whereas for Mate Calinescu, it can be, I quote, a major, perhaps the major component of postmodernist fiction, unquote. Latin American authors have frequently read this genre of magical realism as a tool of political subversion. Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children exemplifies this mode of magical realism. It's not set in Latin America. It's talking about the juxtaposition of the magical and the real and the wonder that emerges out of this kind of mishmash. So the genre is very much set in the South Asian context, in the newly independent India. And through etching telepathic and marvelous connections and shuffling and reshuffling predestined meanings, Rushdie redefines the post-colonial Indian nation as a magically imagined community. So this is very much in tandem with what we have read in Benedict Anderson's notion of imagined communities, that he wants to argue a nation is. This is very much present in Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. Wendy B. Faris would note that the seed of Shehrazade's Children underlines and informs the postmodern conditions that are available, that inform Midnight's Children. So we also see that in 1001 Arabian Nights or Persian Nights, there is this tendency of, story leading to story, the complex narration that we have. Shehrazade, the central character, is a popular paradigm of the high modernist narrator who is completely exhausted and threatened by death, but still trying to be inventive, trying to be clever and creative. Shehrazade represents the cause of all virgins across time and space, whom the father is sending to King Shahryar. King Shahryar being a man who wants to assuage his disillusionment at his wife's infidelity by sleeping with a new woman every night and then putting her to death in the morning. So Shehrazade, as a way of deferring her death, in a very Derridian sense, deferring the final meaning, deferring any final decision, begins to tell stories to the king, stories that are embedded in each other. So the king has to wait until the next night in order to hear the end of a tale. A tale always ends midway when the dawn is about to break. So, and by the time it's next morning already, Shehrazade has embedded one story into another. So this story is not complete without knowing the next one. The king cannot bear to kill her because he is genuinely curious. He has got a hang of listening to Shehrazade's stories, and this way we see Shehrazade surviving for 1001 nights. By this time, she has given birth to 3 children, and at this point, she confronts the king. After 3 years have elapsed, she tells the king, about her situation, and then he relents, he gives up his disillusionment and the associated punishment. So we see Sherazade survives by being clever. Shehrazade's clever style of spinning yarn of tales harkens back Julia Kristova's notion of language as the ultimate fetish, yet also something that is constantly slipping away, a temporary, slippery zone that language is, and yet something that is indispensable and a life preserver, and something that constantly covers the lack which is inherent in our relation with the death and the abject. So, language as a way of deferring the final meaning that we must meet, that human conditions must meet, which is death. And Sherazade very cleverly tries to dodge, tries to, push her death away by yet another day. This is, symptomatic of the condition of the high modernist narrator. Narration enables, facilitates, and informs individual survival, the narrator's survival. So, in their embedded structure and growing out of one another and continuing till 1001 Nights, Shehrazade's tales point to the autogenerative nature of fictions and even that of the language, a characteristic that is progressively made more explicit in the uh, post-Joycean age. So, a characteristic that is progressively made more explicit in the post-Joycean age. In Shehrazade's tales, just like in James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, language takes on magical properties in order to light up the nights that are verging on nightmares in which they are told. So the creativity and the generativity of magical realist writing operates at all levels in the fictions, on the structure, on the structural plane, with stories that grow out of other stories, on the mimetic plane, uh, with characters that duplicate themselves in miraculous feats of doubling, and then we have the metaphorical register where images that take on lives of their own and engender uh, other images beyond themselves, are independent of their referential world. So, and then we have the metaphorical register with images that take on lives of their own and engender or create other images beyond themselves, independent of their referential worlds. So, some of the important postmodern artwork that are considered as magical realist works include, but are not limited to, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, Milan Kundera's The Book of Laughter and Forgetting, Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children, Robert Pinget's That Voice, Carlos Fuentes's Distant Relations, D.M. Thomas's The White Hotel, uh, the then we have William Kennedy's Ironweed, Patrick Suskind's Perfume, Toni Morrison's Beloved, Laura Esquivel's Like Water for Chocolate, and Anna Costello's So Far from God. So other precursors and contemporaries that one may recall in the context of magical realism, that is, are Gogol, uh, Kafka, Borges, Carpentier, Paz, Cortázar, Calvino, Wilson Harris, Allende, and Ben Okri. Having said that, I would personally read Alejo Carpentier and Julio Cortázar as very much part of the magical realist tradition. They are postmodern writers, but also very much, invested into the idea of the magical realist creations. So let's look at the primary characteristics of magical realist fiction. So, the first thing that comes to mind when talking about the magical realist fiction is that the text contains an irreducible element of magic, something one cannot explain according to the laws of the universe as one knows them. So, in terms of the text, magical things really do happen. So, for example, in Distant Relations, we have young Victor and Andre that really become a twin fetus floating in a pool. In 100 years of solitude, we have Remedios, the beauty really ascend heavenward. And in Perfume, we have Grenouille really distill a human scent from the bodies of virgins. So then in Ironweed, we have Francis Fellon's Dead Enemies really do hopping on the trolley that he's riding and speaking to him. So the irreducible elements in an existential fashion keep sticking out and reminding that they do exist. The magical does exist. When seen from the perspective of these elements themselves, so there, when seen from the perspectives of these elements themselves, there are remnants of existential anguish at an that we see in this this interface between the magic and the real. For the magical elements, the anguish comes from having space in this uncooptable world, which is tempered, and their anguish is tempered by a more playful mood of surrealism. So, when we see from the perspective of these magical elements, there are remnants of existential anguish that emerges because of this uncooptable world, how the magic can sit on the real, how do they interface, and this lack of compatibility between the two is tempered by a more playful mood of surrealism. So, as an example, in So Far From God, Ana Castillo confirms the irreducible nature of a dead person's reappearance by verifying her sighting from several people. And I quote, Esperanza was also occasionally seen. Yes, seen not only by La Loca, but also by Domingo, who saw her from the front window. And once, although she had thought at first it was a dream, Esperanza came and lay down next to her mother. Unquote. So, like the fleeting and momentary metaphors that repeatedly call attention to themselves as metaphors, metaphoric presences, and thus remain partially unassimilated within the texture of the real narrative. The magic in these texts refuse to be assimilated into the mundaneness. They do not completely diffuse and merge with the mundane world. The magic also exists symbolically in a foreign textual culture and setting as a disturbing element, something that the people are not used to, not habituated with, something that cannot be foisted smoothly into the realism of that particular culture. So, irreducible magic often means disrupting the ordinary logic of cause and effect. Let's take the example of Midnight's Children. Salim's claims in Midnight's Children that he caused this or that historical event by singing a song, by moving a paper pot on a dining table, is a similar logical reversal where ordinary logic do not apply. So, Melchiades's manuscript turns out to be a prediction rather than just a recording of events. in 100 years of solitude. So, it implicitly asks whether um, we or anyone could be master of one's own fate, or whether we are victims of our fate, right? Even though the reader may remain skeptical in the face of the proposed sequences, the enormity of the historical events, the human suffering that is involved in these events, and the consequent dissatisfaction one feels at the traditional ways in which such phenomena have been integrated and naturalized into our cultural logic, uh, cause the reader to question such pre-given logic and want to believe in the magical realists' alternative new fictional arrangements. So, for example, the process of colonization, the process of domination of the non-white people by the uh, Europeans was seen as natural till we have uh, you know critics uh, you know the critics that are playing with words, playing with form, bringing in the magical to question and problematize the assumptions associated with this entire worldview or entire system of thought. So, colonization is not let to remain as something natural. Racism is not let to remain as something natural. In the same way, magical realism, the magical realist techniques, uh, through this new objectivity, brings in question of gendered bias, especially focusing on the new world, the post-colonial world. So all hierarchies that engender out of our old ways of seeing and believing are kind of shaken by the magical realist techniques. Uh, in the light of reversals of logic and the irreducible elements of magic, the real as we know may be made to seem as amazing or even ridiculous, right? So when we have certain so magical realism is basically hitting at the at the core of certain deadened assumptions that we do not even discuss because they are almost viscerally present in us. They could be based on religion or some habits put into us, inculcated in us through uh, you know mainstream institutions. So magical realism gives us the eye of the child and makes us understand and wonder how ridiculous, how absurd these institutions can be after a point. The reactions of ordinary people to these magical events reveal behaviors that uh, we recognize and that disturb us, right? We see something as magical, for example, when it does not follow the socially agreed upon uh, norm, the normative way of being and thinking. So, for instance, the magical treatment cracks open the artificiality of institutions, like I said, institutions such as religion, such as nation, all of which are human artifacts, the categories or institutions that do not have anything natural about them, and even language. All of these also secure our basic fundamental identity. So, our identity is put at stake in a certain sense by the magical realist and postmodern artwork, right? So, we are rereading our institutions, we are reconsidering our habits, our familiar space and beliefs in a new light, in the light of new objectivity. And this also, in a way, reminds me of something very important that Holabach says in Mythologies. Um, uh, Barthes, who is a post-structuralist, says that the system of signification, right, uh, which rules at the heart of collective consciousness, uh, is also responsible for the myths in any given society. So, how do the myths function? The myths are ascribing some naturalness, some historical dimension to a ritual, to a practice. These forms, these practices, it could be a marriage ritual, it could be a worshipping, it could be a death ceremony. They are all embedded in our society for generations, for ages, and after a point, we do not question why we perform in a certain way in a given context. It could be a marketplace, it could be um, a, a football match. So he is interested in the uh, semiotics of these different public settings, let's say, or different collective practices, and he says that the relation between the form and the meaning, or the signifier and the signified, is completely arbitrary. The rules of a football match are natural to the people that have grown up watching a football, but to an outsider, a person who is an outsider to the game of soccer, it is a magic. It is at least something that defies interpretation, right? So there is nothing natural about the relationship between form and meaning that one bring together to inform a myth in a given culture. So the next feature of magical realism, now we are going to move to the next feature of magical realism, which is that descriptions lay out a strong presence of the phenomenal world. This is the realist part of magical realism. Like we know, realism is very fond of describing elaborately, and we find the same also in magical realism. And this is precisely the quality, or let's say the feature that distinguishes the genre of magical realism from that of fantasy and allegory. Realist descriptions create a fictional world which very much resembles with the one we live in. Uh, and in many instances, it very effectively makes use of details. There are extensive and elaborate details that describe things and places and people. So, on the one hand, the attention to the sensory, to this world, represents a continuation and even to an extent renewal of the realistic tradition. Um, on the other, uh, in magical realist fiction, in addition to magical events, let's say the appearance and reappearance of beloved, or Francis Fellon's conversations with the dead, and even phenomena such as Melchiades's manuscript, um, Salim transmitting and receiving Radiohead, or even Granules' nose. All these details are themselves magical in nature. So, all we are giving details, um and thereby emulating the realist tradition in the sense of the form. Uh, if we look at the content of these details, they verge on the magical rather than the mundane, and they entrance the reader through magical descriptions. And so, through descriptions, we are not embedding ourselves to this world. We are not showing our loyalty to the mundane meanings, but we are making a clear departure from realism. Description apparently something that a quality that is associated with realism makes the magical real precisely what it is, a departure from the mundane. So the function of detailing is freed from a traditionally mimetic role to a large extent. So it is true even when considering canonical realist texts from the Barthesian perspective, uh, which questions their mimetic qualities and treat details only as markers that do not give away uh, a lot of information. Other than the fact that the story is real, even from the understanding of the realist text in the Barthesian sense, we see that the magical details can serve as markers which are premised on completely opposite intentions and opposite directions, signaling that the details are taking us in the domain of the imaginary. So, for example, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's rewriting of the history of Latin America in the fictional town of Macondo, including a massacre that has been elided from the public record, from the formal history. Now, that's where magical realism comes from. The opening of Milan Kundera's The Book of Laughter and Forgetting, which restores a man airbrushed out of history by party doctrine. And in all these examples, so in all these instances, um, some of the elements of magical realism uh, do draw on the mythical components, although they are not one and the same. The combination of myth and magic implies so eternal mythic truths or historical events are what make up our collective memory. Like I said, the myths that appear as history, they are part of they are essential components of the collective consciousness of a given society. Formation of histories in so formation of histories can also include magic and wisdom, folk wisdom, local hearsays, uh, adages, and the wise sayings. For example, events told from Ursula's or Melchiades's point of view that we find in 100 Years of Solitude, right? So history is not only about facts, but it is enmeshed in magic. It brings in qualities of uh, mm, you know wise sayings and truisms and maxims too. So history is the weight that ties the balloon of magic to the this world. So once we add a historical dimension, the magic is prevented from taking off, and it in a way warns against too great a lightness of magical being, that both Fuentes and Kundera include dangerous sets of floating angels in their novels. So history is the weight that keeps the balloon of magic from taking off. It tethers the balloon of magic to the this worldly conditions, as if to warn against too great a lightness of uh, magical being. Uh, we see both Fuentes and Milan Kundera include dangerous sets of floating angels in their novels. We see in the Book of Laughter and Forgetting these angels holding hands and dancing in a ring, and not everyone can participate in that circular dance movement. It goes on to represent that kind of lightness, dangerous lightness that does not have a historical dimension to it, goes on to become a kind of lightness of ahistorical irresponsibility, something that has no coordinates whatsoever with what uh, common people can identify with. So, magic not alone, but magic wedded to reality. So, the ahistorical and dangerously unanchored position is symbolized through the twin fetus at the end of Fuentes's novel Distant Relations, which are a remainder of old Heredia's desire to create an angel that is purely a magical or a fantastic category. And the fetus floats, I quote from the book, with a placidity that repudiates all past, all history, all repentance, unquote. Historical anchoring is well demonstrated in what John Foster calls as felt history, right? Where the characters can experience the historical forces with their body, with all their senses and all their sensibilities. So, this phenomenon is exaggerated and particularized in magical realist fiction. Some examples uh, could be uh, the coincidence of Salim's birth with that of the birth of the independent nation of India. Lisa's pains that anticipate her death at Babiyar, Granuel's magical nose that is born from the smells of Renaissance Europe, and the division of Fuentes's characters between Latin America and Europe. Right? The characters are divided to represent the Latin America and Europe. So the material world is present in all of magical realism's detailed and concrete variety, as it is in the case of a realist work, but with some differences. One of them being that the objects may take on their own lives and their, own destiny, and thereby become magical, proceeding beyond both descriptions and beyond familiar references. So, in 100 Years of Solitude, the yellow butterflies that appear in Mauricio, Babylonia, and the basket in which Salim travels from Bangladesh to Bombay in Midnight's Children, the shiny spherical object that young Victor Heredia finds at the ruins of Xochicalco in Distant Relations, even the doors that open at Philippe's touch in Fuentes's novel Aura, all of these are examples of magical objects that take on their own life in the narrative, and they follow their own destiny. They have a spirit of their own. They are not, after a point, being guided by the author or the narrator. The materiality extends to the word objects that play as metaphors, and these word objects take on a special kind of textual life. They become very three-dimensional after a point where the narrative has arrived, and they keep appearing and reappearing again and again in the narrative until the weight of their verbal reality, becomes more than their referential function. They are no longer only verbal reality, they signify, they allude to more. So, Salim's Pitoon and the sheet through which Adam Aziz in Midnight's Children examines his future wife Naseem tend to function as magical objects, and even the tick on the tree branch that we find in perfume, even the recurring roses, breasts, hotels, and hair that keep coming in the narrative of the White Hotel. These are all examples of uh, of magical objects. So, magical realism comprises the part of surrealism that could be written down. It's textual poetics, so it is not as remote to reality as surrealism. It is something that can be plotted and documented, and they exploit to the fullest the magic of metaphor and foreground the enchanting quality of poetry, of poesy, which, however, defies any kind of uh, logic or uh, challenges reason. So, in taking poetics of defamiliarization to its extreme, uh, one could say that magical realism is the progenitor. The it carries the it significantly carries the legacy of surrealism. Uh, However, in contrast to the magical images that are that are constructed by surrealism out of ordinary objects, which aim at appearing virtually unmotivated. So they are there for the sake of magic, for the sake of surreal and fantastic, and they programmatically resist any kind of interpretation. Uh, Magical realist images, on the other hand, do project a similar initial aura of surprising craziness, but they do have they do play a role, as criticizing certain aspects of a given society. So these magically real elements, the magically realist elements and modes of narration have uh, a key role as social critic. They comment, critic, and observe certain aspects, certain functionings in a society. So their real motivation, uh, you know, lies in the psychological, the social, the emotional, the political, uh, which reveal after certain scrutiny. So they're not there only for the sake of the magic. They're also trying to comment on the real. So, for example, Franz Kafka and Grombowitz uh, actualize metaphors through projecting inner states outward. So they are making the inner on the outer, as in the case of Grigor Samsa. In the case of Kafka and Grombowicz, we see two kinds of tendencies. Kafka actualizes metaphors through projecting inner states outward through the character of Gregor Samsa, for example, who metamorphoses into an insect and flies out of the window in the end. Or public characterizations are projected inward, as in the case of Grombowicz's Pornographia, where, which, as Grombowicz himself states, I quote, is the grotesque story of a gentleman who becomes a child because other people treat him like a child, unquote. So, coming to the third characteristic or feature of the magical realist writing, the reader may hesitate at one point or another between two contradictory understandings of a given event, and uh, this leads to experiencing some kind of unsettling doubts. Much of magical realism is encompassed by Tizedveten Todorov's well known formulation of the fantastic as existing during a story. When the reader is in two minds, hesitating between the uncanny as events defy explanation according to the laws of the natural universe, and also the marvelous, which requires certain alteration of these laws. So, the reader's primary doubt in most cases is between understanding an event as a character's a hallucination, or as a miracle. So it takes the reader a while to understand whether an event is part of a character's hallucination or if it is indeed a miracle. So we are going to draw an example from the Beloved and stop our lecture here. The mysterious character of Beloved in Toni Morrison's novel Beloved slithers provokingly between the two options that we just now mentioned, the uncanny and the marvelous, whether it is a character's hallucination or if it is indeed a miracle. It plays with our rationalist tendencies to recuperate and to co-opt the marvelous. Women outside Sithi's house ask themselves, was it the dead daughter come back or a pretend? Was it whipping Sithi? A bit farther on, the novel tells readers, Paul D knows Beloved is truly gone. Disappeared, some say, exploded right before their eyes. Ella is not so sure. Maybe, she says, maybe not. Could be hiding in the trees waiting for another chance. Unquote. So I would like to stop our discussion here today and let's meet with another round of discussions in our next lecture. Thank you.